What is a pull to a double elevator? We're going to do this one out of double lapel grips. Normally, when we sit to guard, we're gripping at least one of our training partner's sleeves, or we're cross gripping up like so. Not this time. We're going to come out towards our training partner, and we're going to get through, and we're going to get double lapel grips. Okay, I don't care what he does with his hands, that's up to him. You don't really control that. But I want two hands here like so. It's kind of a messy looking grip, but it's very effective for what we're about to do. I also want to square my training partner up. So he's going to be moving and pulling him like so that I separate his feet. I'm going to step one of my legs between my training partner's legs, and my head comes down in front of my own fist, just like so. As I make my first step, I'm going to pull my body in. I'm going to lift our training partner so we force his hands down to the mat in this messy looking position like so. From positions like this, his stance is kind of broken. He has to try and recover from here. But recovery is not so easy. There's many things we can do in terms of moving this guy around the mat now. They're off balance, people drag them down, get them into armbar situations, etc., etc. Anytime guys plant their hands on the mat to recover their balance, their stance is broken, and it's easy for us to start swimming inside. So many things for us to do. Once we get those hands on the mat, there's all kinds of things you can do in terms of taking people's bags, etc., etc. Okay? So if we can get this guy overreaching and committed to the mat, you're going to be able to use that extended arms, hands on the floor to attack them. So as we come out towards our training partner, we go through, we fix up our first grip. We play in the standing position, our second grip goes on, and then we just step inside our training partner's legs. As we make that step, we come lift and get them out of balance. As they go into recover balance, that's exactly when we go on the attack. You've got a ton of ways to underhook your opponent, a ton of ways to come up and start working from half guard, etc., etc. Okay, it's a very, very practical way to drag someone down, break their stance, and get underneath their arms into good attacking positions. So once again, from a standing start, so we lock up with our training partner, we see an opportunity with our first grip. As we work from in here, we get our second grip. Now we just step and get this guy completely out of balance. And from these kinds of situations, that's where we can start to go to work. No matter how we land in these situations, there's going to be some degree of advantage to it. Okay? It's not difficult from here to go through into the various other kinds of attacks that we saw earlier as well. Many of the guards that we looked at will be readily available out of this double elevated guard pull. Again, anytime you get hands on the mat with arms spread, it's going to be relatively easy for you to attack. From standing position, lapel feed. Second hand goes on, separate his feet, step 1, 2, and there we have it. His stance is broken, and he's ready to be attacked in numerous different ways from this position. Okay? A very simple and very effective way to drag it down to the mat with advantage for you. We've looked at the idea of pulling someone down into a guard position from standing. Now, ideally, we'd like to be able to pull them down in the manners we described and then immediately sweep them and get on top. That's our dream, that's our goal. But we've got to be realistic, guys. 9 times out of 10, when you pull someone down to close guard, they resist strongly, and you have to fight now from bottom position. Now, that's exactly what this whole video is about. Don't worry, there's a dozen things you can do and many dozens of things you can do to be effective from bottom position. We'll be looking at a whole bunch of them. But the first thing you've got to be able to do is you have to be able to retain a guard long enough in the bottom position in order to be able to enact the various techniques that we show here in this video. It won't do you any good for me to show you a bunch of effective techniques if you can't just hold guard long enough to actually make them work. So your first skill from bottom position is always going to be retaining guard so that you can hold guard position long enough to make the techniques we look at later on in the video actually have enough time to work effectively. Now, if there's one area where I see older athletes struggle the most against younger, fitter, faster, more explosive athletes, it's exactly in the area of guard retention. The most likely way in which an older athlete or a less mobile or less athletic athlete is going to get blitzed by a younger, faster, more athletic rival is exactly in a situation where you find yourself in an open guard, you have no contact with him, and he can utilize his speed advantage over you. So, Brian, I think you're about a decade younger than me, so he's definitely got the age advantage on me here. Watch how he blitzes past me. Okay, if I have no contact on Brian, okay, no contact, this is exactly the kind of area where without contact, I can't slow this guy down. Okay, and if I can't slow a younger, faster, more explosive athlete, it's never a good thing. And he just touches and goes and straight past you, like, oh no, and you're past. Okay, if I see among my older students in the gym an area where they struggle the most against younger, fitter, more explosive athletes, it's exactly in that area where they have no contact and the guy just quickly gets a grip and you're past. Okay, that's where their speed advantage counts the most because you have no connection to them whatsoever. That's where you're most likely to be beaten by the younger, fitter, more athletic opponent. So our goal in this video is to avoid those situations as much as possible. We want the exact opposite. We want to maximize contact between ourselves and our opponent. Now, when it comes to guard retention, if I'm coaching young, competitive athletes, the three movements that you associate the most with guard retention all involve a fairly high degree of mobility. Okay, so for example, one very, very common form of movement with regards to guard retention is high leg movement. When an opponent moves to an angle, we put our post, moves to an angle, and from here we use a high leg where we bring our butt up off the ground, the legs come across, and from here we pull our whole body around the corner and go back to face our opponent. So every time this guy moves to an angle, we have to use that high leg motion where our leg comes up high. We have to show some degree of flexibility here and put this guy back in guard. Okay. The second most common physical movement involved with guard retention is inversion. So, for example, if Brian goes all the way through the north-south position, and then from here I'm expected to throw my whole body out, come around and face my opponent out of the inversion position and come back in. Every time this guy comes around the corner, we're supposed to throw our body up and over, invert, and put this guy back in guard. And the third most common movement is that of rolling. And the opponent comes down to two knees, starts to come in. We want to get knee and shoulder in, roll through, and put this guy back in guard position. Okay, so those movements, inversion, rolling, and high leg, are three of the core movements which enable young, gifted, athletic, competitive athletes to retain guard against resistance. Then when you're coaching people who are older or have no athletic background whatsoever, they often struggle to retain guard using those movements. They often find they come in a day late and a dollar short, and they try the roll, they're a little bit slow, and the guy just blasts through and passes. So what I've found over the years is that the three core movements for athletically gifted people typically don't work well for older or less athletic players. So what should we do instead? Well, we have to base everything when it comes to guard retention on the notion of connection. There are three kinds of connection, which as an older or less athletic athlete, I want you to focus on. The first is feet to shoulders. We'll be looking at this in more detail soon, but I don't want to, I'm just going to throw the broad picture at you first. The idea is that if I get a hold of my training partner's hands, if I can get my feet to my training partner's shoulders, that forms a connection to our opponent, where regardless of which side we're on, when he goes to move to an angle now, you're connected to him. When he goes to throw your legs around, get your grip slide. From here, when he goes to throw legs around, as long as I can keep my feet in front of my training partner's shoulders, we're connected to him in a way where it's going to be hard for him to pass our guard. Okay, and we can keep our legs at an angle where, as long as I dominate the space inside his shoulders with the outside blades of my feet, I'm connected to him. When he tries to find angle, I don't have to get into any kind of convoluted rolling, high legging, inversion, or anything like that. Every time he goes to move, you're connected to him. As he goes side to side, you're in the perfect position to hold up and find yourself connected in a way where it's going to be very hard for him to pass as long as your feet occupy that position in front of his shoulders. Okay? So that's the first kind of connection. Don't worry, we'll be going over that in more detail soon. But that's your first big picture. The second kind of connection that I want you to focus on, this one is particularly important for older athletes, is to dominate the space between his elbows. This is the aspect of guard retention that very few people talk about. Most people focus on the leg work of guard retention. That's natural because that's the thing you see the most with your eyes. But the secret ingredient to guard retention, especially for older athletes who don't have very mobile legs, is to dominate the space between my opponent's elbows. And if you can do this, it's going to be hell for your opponent to pass you guard. And you will be effective at retaining guard even if you don't have good body mobility overall. So, for example, if Brian is going into a pass and I see him coming around the corner, as long as I keep my elbow inside his, As long as I can keep my knee inside the opposite elbow. When Brian goes to pass, he can go all the way down to the floor and can do whatever he wants. I'll always be able to move back inside him. As long as I have space between the elbows under my control. That is, my wrist, forearm, and elbow is inside his, and on the other side the same, or my knee and shin inside my training partner's knee and elbow. Now, even if Brian put his hand on my knee and pushed my legs aside, even though he beats my legs when it comes time for him to pin me, I can always move my legs back inside. As long as that space between the elbows is under my control. Okay? So even if he does a good job of blasting past my legs, as long as I'm in front of that elbow of his, when he tries to pin me down and hold me, I'm always going to push him back and put him back in guard. Okay? So that's the second big point. First point, you want your feet in front of your training partner's shoulders as much as possible. Second point, you want your elbows, knees, and shins inside his elbows. And if you can dominate the space between his elbows, it's going to be awfully, awfully difficult for your opponent to solidify and finish a guard pass. They can get close, they can get angles, they can get down low, they can do all kinds of things, but they won't be able to hold you down and pin you as long as you dominate the space between their elbows. So those are the first two big connection points that I want you to focus on. The idea that when someone goes into control our legs, we want to control the fronts of their shoulders. And as long as we can do that, you're going to be a menace to pass. If they get past your legs, then the next thing we have to dominate is the space inside their elbows. And if we can do that, they can get close to passing. They can even get over past your knees. But they're never going to be able to control your head and shoulders. And as long as my head and shoulders are free, the rest of my body can always catch up later. And you can always put them back in guard. Okay? So those are the first two big points with regards to guard retention. Now, the third big one. You have to have faith in your knee shield. The knee shield is the single best weapon that an older or less athletic player can use to help himself retain guard. It requires almost zero flexibility and joint mobility to be effective. It's the key because it enables you to push and create distance with just the strength of your legs, but not in a way that requires any kind of mobility. Okay, I don't need to invert, I don't need to high leg, I don't need to do any of those things. All I've got to do is track my opponent's hip with my knee. It's a relatively easy thing to do, even for people who lack mobility overall. So say, for example, if Brian goes for a simple knee cut, and in these situations, as he goes across, I take my knee and I track his hip. So that even as Brian goes into pass and successfully goes over my leg, we're in a position now where my knee prevents him from getting in close. And as he tries to finish the pass, it creates enough space for me always to bring my second leg back inside. As he goes across in the opposite